Hey guys, welcome to our channel. Please click the subscribe button and click the bell icon and never miss another update from Almighty Java.
In this video, we will learn about strategy design pattern. So if you have not watched the earlier videos about the design pattern, then please watch it. Link in the description. Before going further, first let's see what is strategy design pattern. The strategy design pattern comes under a behavior pattern. Behavior pattern categorizes object communication and simplifies the dynamic control flow of object behavior. The strategy pattern enables selecting an algorithm at runtime. Instead of implementing a simple algorithm directly, the code receives runtime instructions as to which in a family of algorithms to use. The strategy pattern helps us encapsulate an algorithm into a class structure. Objects then can be instantiated dynamically according to the program's requirement and suitability. Let's implement. First, let's create a new package so we can create all the related classes inside that package. So here, package name, let's say strategy. Let's create a class and the class name, let's say test strategy. Let's add the main method here. Add some message to print. Now, let's run this code. See, it is printing the message like a strategy design pattern. Little explanation about how are we going to develop the implementation of the strategy design pattern. So like I explained earlier, strategy pattern gives us the flexibility to choose an algorithm at runtime. So here we are going to implement the authentication using three different ways. Like traditional way means using username and password, or using the social networking, or using the token. Here I am not going to implement any of them in detail, but I can give you the scenario so you can implement a strategy design pattern for the same case. I hope things are pretty much clear to you. Now let's see how to implement. Let's create an interface and the interface name, let's say authentication. As I said earlier, we require a class that helps us to delegate the authentication based on the user input. The class name should be quite self-explainable. So let's create a class and the class name, let's say context. Later we will implement the code for this class. Now let's focus on the interface which we just created. So this interface will contain only one method and the method name, let's say authenticate. This method will not return anything and will not accept anything as a parameter. Now let's implement this interface. So I'm not going to create any new class. Here itself I'm going to create three classes and those classes will implement authentication interface and provide a different definition for this authenticate method. Let's create a class and the class name, let's say password based authentication, and implements authentication interface. Now here we need to override the authenticate method. So inside this method you can keep your own logic, but for this time I am just adding some print message. Now let's create a new class and the class name, let's say social authentication. Follow the same step as we did for the password based authentication class. Now again, let's create a new class and the class name, let's say token based authentication. Follow the same steps as we did for the password based authentication class. So here you can see we created one interface in three classes, and these classes providing the different implementation for the authenticate method. Here I am just giving you the example, but in real time scenario this authenticate method contains the actual logic. I hope whatever we added till now it is clear for you. Now let's add some code for the context class. First let's create a reference variable for authentication. Now let's create one argument constructor for this class, and here one argument is nothing but the authentication. Add the standard code. Now let's create a method and this method will not return anything, and the method name, let's say execute strategy. And from inside this method, let's call the authenticate method of authentication. As we knew, authentication is an interface. So during the creation of an object of context class, we need to pass the object of the class which implemented the authentication interface, and then need to call this execute strategy method. So the passing object will decide which implemented method is going to execute. I hope this is clear for you. Now let's add the rest of the logic in the test strategy main method. First, let's create the reference variable for the context class. And just to make it dynamic, I am adding the code. So because of that, I will be able to take input using the scanner. Don't worry, it is simple code. So just watch, it is a quite standard code. Just to make it real, I am adding all this code. So as per this code, it will read input until for this option, user have not entered N. Let's add messages for options. Now let's add code for the choose option. Now let's add a switch, and inside this switch add all the cases for option 1, 2 and 3. And if the input is invalid, then throw an exception. So for case 1, as you can see, the option is for using password. So here, let's create the context object and pass the password-based authentication class object. And for case 2, pass the social authentication class object. For case 3, pass the token-based authentication class object. And for invalid input, let's add the default case. And that's it. Switch statement related changes are done. So now, based on the selection, it will create the context object and pass the desired object in the constructor. But that is not enough. So at the end, we need to call the execute strategy method. And that's it. Let's quickly go through all the changes which we added. I hope you understood whatever we added. Let's run and see how it is working. See, it is asking to choose the option. Let's enter 1. See, it is printing the message from password-based authentication class authenticate method. So like I said, using strategy design pattern, we can choose the algorithm at runtime. So here, algorithm means the code logic, but in this case, authentication logic. Based on the user selection, it will pass the appropriate object in the context class and execute strategy will call the authenticate method. I hope things are clear to you. Let's test the rest of the things. We covered all the options, so this time let's select N. Okay, so strategy design pattern implementation completes. Let's review whatever code we implemented. I checked in these changes. I will show you from where you can find this code. See, here is the repository. Here is the code for the strategy design pattern. I hope you learned something from this video. If yes, then do the needful things like share, comment and subscribe. That's it for this video.
Please like and share this video. Subscribe our channel. Thanks for watching.